She can hardly keep a job. My mom testified against me. The Chief Justice rose and said, "She's been a judge for 6 years." My mom's face went pale. Can you imagine your own mother testifying against you in court? Not just testifying, but tearing down everything you are, everything you've built, painting you as an unfit parent, all while she had no idea who I truly was. That day in court, my life took a turn I never saw coming. It was a betrayal that cut me to the bone, but it also became the moment I finally found my voice. Growing up in Lexington, a quaint little town outside Boston, I always felt like I was performing on a stage. And the sole audience member? My mother, Evelyn. The problem was, she never applauded. Our modest two-story colonial house looked picture-perfect from the outside, exactly the way my mother wanted everything in her life to appear. But inside those walls, it was a totally different story. My mom was the embodiment of perfectionism. Nothing was ever good enough, especially when it came to me. I'd bring home an A-, and she'd ask, why wasn't it an A+? If I won second place in a competition, she'd immediately point out the girl who came in first. Her standards were impossible. Her criticism? Relentless. Adelaide, stand up straight. Adelaide, your hair's a mess. Adelaide, that outfit makes you look heavy. Her words followed me everywhere, echoing in my head even when she wasn't around. I tried so desperately to please her, to rearrange myself into whatever configuration I thought might finally earn her approval. It never came. My father, James, was the buffer between us. He was a kind man with gentle eyes who would wink at me across the dinner table whenever my mother started in on one of her critical tangents. Your mother just wants what's best for you, he'd tell me later, but his eyes always held an apology. He loved her, but he saw how her words cut into me. Then, when I was 12, my father had a heart attack while driving home from work. His car swerved off the road, right into a tree. He died instantly. Just like that. I lost my defender, my ally, the only person who made me feel like I was enough, just as I was. After his death, my mother changed. Her criticism intensified, as if she needed to compensate for the absence of his gentleness with an extra dose of her harshness. She became obsessed with appearances, with what the neighbors might think, with maintaining the illusion of the perfect family despite our obvious brokenness. "We need to be strong, Adelaide," she'd say. "No one respects weakness." But what she really meant was, she didn't want me to grieve publicly, to show any sign that we were struggling. My tears were relegated to my pillow at night, silent and hidden. School became my refuge. I threw myself into academics with a fervor that surprised even my teachers. If I couldn't earn my mother's approval, I would earn it from everyone else. Each perfect test score, each academic award was a shield I held up against her criticism. They rarely worked. "Sarah Miller's daughter just got into Harvard early decision," she'd say, ignoring my straight-A report card on the table between us. "And she plays 3 instruments." I didn't play any instruments. I wasn't exceptional in any way that mattered to my mother. But I discovered something during those painful teenage years. I had a passion for justice. It started in debate club, where I found my voice arguing points of ethics and law. It continued when I joined a youth court program and felt, for the first time, like I was exactly where I belonged. When I told my mother I wanted to be a lawyer someday, maybe even a judge, she laughed. Not a kind laugh, but the dismissive kind that made my stomach turn. "Be realistic, Adelaide. Those positions are for people with connections, with pedigrees. Focus on something attainable." In that moment, standing in our kitchen with my future dreams freshly ridiculed, something shifted inside me. Her words, instead of crushing me as they usually did, hardened into a determination that would carry me forward. I would become a judge. Not despite what my mother believed about me, but because of it. I would prove her wrong. College applications became my secret rebellion. I applied to 17 schools without telling my mother about most of them. When the acceptance letters started arriving, including one from Boston University with a partial scholarship, I felt a surge of power. For once, I had options that were not dictated by her expectations. "Boston University is too expensive," she said dismissively when I showed her the letter. The community college is perfectly adequate. I went to Boston University anyway. To cover what the scholarship didn't, I worked 3 jobs: mornings at a coffee shop near campus, evenings at the university library, and weekends as a research assistant for one of my professors. I barely slept. My mother called it stubbornness. I called it independence. Law school applications followed the same pattern. I studied obsessively for the LSAT, scored in the 98th percentile, and earned a spot at Harvard Law. When I called to tell my mother, her response was predictable. Harvard? How do you expect to pay for that? Always reaching beyond your means, Adelaide. I didn't tell her about the scholarship. I didn't tell her about the loans. I didn't tell her about the continuing jobs that would help me make ends meet. I simply said, "I'll figure it out," and hung up. Harvard Law School was where I met Thomas. He sat next to me in constitutional law. This tall, thoughtful man with kind eyes that reminded me painfully of my father. Unlike everyone else who seemed to be competing for attention, Thomas asked questions that showed he was actually listening to the answers. He noticed things, including me. "You never talk about your family," he observed one night as we studied together in the library. We'd been dating for 3 months by then. "Not much to talk about," I replied, keeping my eyes on my textbook. "Everyone has a story," he said quietly. That night, I told him about my mother, about her impossible standards and constant criticism, about how I had spent my entire life trying and failing to be good enough. Thomas listened without interrupting. And when I finished, he took my hand. "She's wrong about you," he said simply. "And someday she'll realize that." I married Thomas in our final year of law school. My mother attended the small ceremony. Her lips pressed into a thin line of disapproval. "Are you sure about this?" she asked as she straightened my simple dress in the back room of the courthouse where we held the ceremony. "Marriage and a career don't mix well. You'll have to choose eventually." I didn't bother responding. I was done trying to convince her of anything. After graduation, Thomas and I both found positions at firms in Boston. His focus was corporate law. Mine was family law. I worked 70-hour weeks, determined to distinguish myself. When an opportunity came to clerk for a judge, I leapt at it. The clerkship led to a position as an assistant district attorney, where I specialized in cases involving children. My mother remained unimpressed. "Another new job? Can't stick with anything, can you?" she commented during one of our increasingly rare phone calls. I stopped telling her about my career progress after that. Let her believe what she wanted. I knew the truth. I wasn't jumping from job to job. I was climbing. When Lily was born 2 years later, my life expanded in ways I hadn't anticipated. This tiny human with Thomas's kind eyes and my stubborn chin became the center of my universe. For the first time, I understood what it meant to love someone unconditionally. I vowed that my daughter would never question her worth the way I had been forced to question mine. Balancing motherhood and my career was challenging. There were nights when I rocked Lily to sleep with one arm while reviewing case files with the other. There were mornings when I showed up to court having slept 3 hours, with baby formula stains on my blazer that I covered with my robe. But I made it work. Thomas and I were partners in every sense, trading off responsibilities and supporting each other's ambitions. When the call came about the judicial appointment, I was changing Lily's diaper. I was 34 years old, one of the youngest judges ever appointed in our district. The committee had been impressed by my work as an ADA, particularly my handling of sensitive cases involving children in crisis. The position was in family court, exactly where I wanted to be. I accepted immediately. That night, Thomas brought home champagne, and we celebrated in our small apartment with Lily babbling happily between us on the couch. "Are you going to tell your mother?" Thomas asked gently. I considered it. For a moment, I imagined her pride, her realization that she had been wrong about me all along. Then reality reasserted itself. "No," I said finally. She'd find a way to diminish it, to make it seem less than what it is. So my mother continued to believe that I was professionally unstable, jumping from job to job, unable to commit to a career path. Meanwhile, I donned a black robe each morning and made decisions that affected the lives of families in crisis. The irony was not lost on me. For 6 years, I served as a judge while my mother remained ignorant of my position. We maintained a distant relationship, obligatory holiday visits and occasional phone calls that left me drained. She doted on Lily, but couldn't resist criticizing my parenting. She seems very attached to that pacifier. You know that will ruin her teeth. Is that what you're feeding her? No wonder she's so fussy. You work too much. Children need their mother present. I learned to let her words roll off me, protecting both myself and Lily from their sting. What I didn't know was that my mother was collecting these moments, storing them away like ammunition for a battle I didn't yet know was coming. The call came on a Tuesday evening. I was in my chambers, reviewing a particularly difficult custody case, when my sister Natalie's name flashed on my phone screen. Natalie and I had never been close. 2 years younger than me, she had been our mother's favorite, the compliant daughter who never challenged authority. At least, that was true until her junior year of college, when she dropped out and disappeared into a world of substance abuse that had claimed her for the past decade. Adelaide. Her voice was thin, fragile. I need help. She was in rehab again. Her third attempt at sobriety. This time, Child Protective Services had intervened. Her children, Emma and Jack, ages 6 and 4, had been found alone in their apartment while Natalie was unconscious from an overdose in the bathroom. She had survived, but her parental rights were in jeopardy. They say I can't have them back until I complete the program and prove I can stay clean, she said, her voice breaking. They're talking about foster care, Adelaide. Please don't let them put my babies in foster care. I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of what she was asking. Thomas and I had discussed taking in Natalie's children before, during her previous crises, but it had never come to this point. Now it was real. These children, my niece and nephew, whom I had only met a handful of times, needed a home. Let me talk to Thomas, I said. We'll figure something out. Thomas didn't hesitate. Of course, we'll take them, he said that night, as we sat at our kitchen table after Lily had gone to bed. They are family. The next morning, I contacted CPS and began the process of applying for temporary custody of Emma and Jack. The social worker seemed relieved that a family member was stepping forward. The children had been in emergency foster care for 3 days, frightened and confused. There's just one thing, the social worker mentioned near the end of our call. Your mother has also filed for custody. The words hit me like a physical blow. My mother. The woman who had criticized every parenting choice I had ever made. She wanted to take on 2 traumatized children? It made no sense. Are you sure? I asked stupidly. Yes, Evelyn Peterson filed yesterday. She said she's the maternal grandmother and believes the children would be better off with her. A cold feeling settled in my stomach. This wasn't about Emma and Jack. This was about control, about proving that she, not I, knew what was best for children. It was the ultimate statement of her lack of faith in me as a mother. I tried calling her immediately, but she didn't answer. Instead, she sent a text, "We will let the courts decide what is best for the children." The courts? My domain. Except that I couldn't preside over a case involving my own family. And my mother knew that. What she didn't know was that I would be appearing in court, not as a judge, but as a petitioner for custody, revealing my profession in the process. The first mediation session was scheduled for the following week. I took personal leave from my judicial duties, citing a family emergency. The Chief Justice, Morgan Thompson, was understanding. She was a mother herself and had been a mentor to me since my appointment. Take whatever time you need, she said. Family comes first. I arrived at the mediation room to find my mother already seated, her posture rigid, her face set in that familiar expression of disapproval. She wore a navy blue suit that looked new, her hair freshly colored and styled, every detail calculated to project the image of a capable, responsible grandmother. "Hello, Mother," I said, sitting across from her. "Adelaide." She nodded slightly. "I assume you understand why I had to do this." "Actually, no. I don't understand at all. Thomas and I are perfectly capable of caring for Emma and Jack." She gave a small, dismissive sniff. "You have always put your career first. These children need stability, attention, proper guidance. They need someone who will be present." The mediator, a kind-faced woman named Patricia, entered before I could respond to this insult. She explained the process and asked us each to state our case for why we should have custody of the children. I spoke of our home, with its spare bedroom that could easily accommodate both children. I talked about Lily, who was excited to meet her cousins. I explained that Thomas and I had flexible work arrangements that would allow us to be available for the children while maintaining our careers. Then my mother spoke, and I felt the ground shift beneath me. My daughter, she began, her voice dripping with concern, has never been able to maintain stability in her life. She jumps from job to job, never settling, always chasing the next opportunity. Her husband works long hours, and she leaves her own daughter with a nanny most days. These traumatized children need constant care and attention, which I am prepared to provide. I am retired, with a comfortable home and savings. I can dedicate myself to them fully. The mediator looked at me. Would you like to respond to your mother's characterization of your employment history? I opened my mouth, then closed it. A part of me wanted to shout the truth. I am a judge. I have held the same position for 6 years. But another part, the wounded child still seeking approval, couldn't form the words. Instead, I said, my employment is stable. I can provide documentation. My mother smiled thinly. We will see. The mediation ended without resolution. As we left, my mother touched my arm, stopping me in the hallway. I am doing this for the children's sake, she said. You must see that they would be better off with me. No, mother. What I see is that you have never believed in me, and this is just one more way to prove it. Her eyes narrowed. If you really cared about those children, you would step aside. I pulled my arm away. If you really cared about me, you would have supported me just once in my life. I walked away, my hands shaking. This was no longer just about Emma and Jack, though they remained my primary concern. This was about 3 decades of criticism and doubt. This was about finally standing up to the woman who had never thought I was good enough. What I didn't know then was how far she would go to win. She's gathering evidence against you. My attorney, Sophia Winters, informed me during our preparation session for the custody hearing. We sat in her office, a sunlit space with views of the Boston skyline that contrasted sharply with the darkness of our conversation. Evidence? What kind of evidence? I asked, though a part of me already knew the answer. Sophia slid a folder across her desk. Your mother has submitted a detailed account of what she calls your parental deficiencies. She has dates, incidents, quotes. She claims you have been neglectful of Lily and would be similarly neglectful of Emma and Jack. I opened the folder with trembling hands. Inside were pages of meticulously documented criticisms, spanning from Lily's birth to our most recent family gathering 3 months ago. Every perceived mistake, every parenting choice my mother disagreed with, all carefully noted with dates and circumstances. April 3rd, 2 years ago. Adelaide arrived 45 minutes late to Easter dinner. Lily was fussy and appeared overtired. When I suggested the child needed a more consistent schedule, Adelaide dismissed my concern. November 28th, last year, found Lily playing unsupervised in the living room while Adelaide was on her phone in the kitchen. Child could have injured herself on numerous hazards. On and on the list went, a chronicle of manufactured inadequacies that made me look like a careless, self-absorbed mother. The final entry turned my blood cold. June 10th, this year, Adelaide admitted she sometimes takes work calls during Lily's dinner time. Prioritizes career over child's basic needs. Pattern of behavior suggests fundamental unsuitability for taking on additional childcare responsibilities. She has been planning this, I whispered. All those visits, those times she offered to watch Lily, she was building a case against me. Sophia nodded grimly. And she has recruited witnesses. Your Aunt Claire, your cousin Beth, even your old neighbor, Mrs. Sullivan. All prepared to testify about your supposed shortcomings as a parent. I leaned back in my chair, feeling like the air had been sucked from the room. They don't even know me. I see Aunt Claire once a year at Christmas. She moved away when Lily was an infant. Your mother can be very persuasive, it seems, Sophia said. And people are often willing to make statements about things they have minimal direct knowledge of, especially when it comes to family matters. My phone buzzed with a text from Thomas, home with Lily. Social worker just left after home evaluation. Went well, I think. Love you. At least that was something. Our home was clean, safe, and child-friendly. We had already prepared the room for Emma and Jack with twin beds, colorful bedding, and age-appropriate toys. The social worker had seemed impressed with our preparation and Lily's obvious happiness and well-being. What about my job? I asked Sophia. She keeps saying I jumped from job to job. When the truth comes out that I've been a judge for 6 years, that is actually our strongest counterpoint. Sophia confirmed. The revelation about your career stability and position will significantly undermine her credibility. But Adelaide, I have to ask, why did you never tell her about being a judge? I stared out the window at the city below, considering the question. At first, it was because I knew she'd find some way to diminish it, to make it seem less than what it was. Then, as time passed, it became, I don't know, a boundary. The one part of my life she couldn't criticize because she didn't know about it. Sophia nodded, understanding in her eyes. Well, she's about to find out in the most public way possible. The hearing is scheduled for next week, and Judge Thompson will be presiding. Morgan? But she knows me exactly. When your mother claimed you were unstable professionally, the clerk recognized your name and brought it to Judge Thompson's attention. She specifically requested to take the case. A small spark of hope flickered inside me. Morgan Thompson was fair and principled. She wouldn't show favoritism, but she would ensure the truth came to light. That evening, as Thomas and I sat on our back porch after putting Lily to bed, I showed him my mother's documented list of my failures. This is insane, he said, his voice tight with anger. These are completely normal parenting moments twisted to sound neglectful. Being late to Easter dinner makes you an unfit mother? Taking a work call during dinner occasionally means you don't care about your child? By these standards, no parent would qualify as adequate. I leaned against his shoulder, exhausted. She has always been like this. Nothing I do is ever good enough, but I never thought she would go this far. We will fight this, Thomas said firmly. And we will win. The truth is on our side. But as the hearing approached, my confidence wavered. Rumors were spreading through the legal community about the case. Colleagues looked at me with curiosity or pity. I had taken a leave of absence from my judicial duties, but the courthouse was still my workplace, and now it would be the stage for this painful family drama. 2 days before the hearing, Thomas found me sitting on the floor of what would be Emma and Jack's room, surrounded by children's books, crying silently. Adelaide, he said, sitting beside me and taking my hand. Talk to me. What if she's right? I whispered. What if I'm not good enough? What if I can't give these children what they need? Thomas took my face in his hands, forcing me to look at him. Listen to me. You are an exceptional mother to Lily. You will be an exceptional aunt and guardian to Emma and Jack. Your mother's voice in your head is not the truth. It never has been. I nodded, wanting desperately to believe him. The day before the hearing, we met with Emma and Jack for the first supervised visit CPS had arranged. They were beautiful children, with Natalie's dark hair and solemn eyes. Emma, the 6-year-old, was protective of her younger brother, constantly checking to make sure he was okay. Jack, at 4, was shy but curious, peeking at us from behind his sister. Hi, I said, kneeling to their level. I'm your Aunt Adelaide, and this is your Uncle Thomas, and this is your cousin Lily. Lily, excited to meet her cousins, stepped forward with a book in her hands. Do you like stories? She asked them. Emma nodded cautiously. Me too, Lily said, and sat down cross-legged on the floor, patting the space beside her. Slowly, Emma and Jack joined her. And as Lily began to read the book she had memorized, I saw the first hint of relaxation in their small bodies. Thomas squeezed my hand. In that moment, I knew with absolute certainty that we were doing the right thing. These children belonged with us as part of our family. And I would fight with everything I had to make that happen. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept imagining the courtroom, my mother's accusations, the public revelation of my career. Tomorrow, everything would change. For better or worse, the truth would finally come out. The morning of the hearing dawned clear and bright. A beautiful June day that belied the storm brewing inside the courthouse. I stood on the steps of the building where I normally entered through the judicial chambers, feeling strangely disoriented. Today, I would walk through the main entrance like any other citizen seeking justice. "Ready?" Thomas asked, his hand steady on my back. I nodded, though ready was the last thing I felt. We had dressed carefully that morning, professional but approachable. I wore a navy blue dress with a light cardigan, deliberate choices to project stability and warmth. Thomas was in a gray suit, his lucky tie, the one Lily had picked out for him on his last birthday. Inside, the courthouse was already bustling with the day's business. A few colleagues nodded to me as we passed, their expressions carefully neutral. News of the case had spread, and I could feel curious eyes following us as we made our way to the designated courtroom. My mother was already there, seated beside her attorney, a sharp-featured man named Richard Harlow, known for his aggressive tactics in family court. She wore a conservative gray suit with a pearl necklace, her hair perfectly styled, the very picture of a dignified grandmother. When she saw me, she straightened her shoulders, but didn't acknowledge me otherwise. Emma and Jack's social worker, Miss Patel, sat in the front row, a thick file on her lap. She had visited both our home and my mother's during the evaluation process. Her report would carry significant weight in the judge's decision. At precisely 9 o'clock, the bailiff called the court to order, and Chief Justice Morgan Thompson entered. Tall and imposing in her black robes, with silver threaded through her dark hair, she commanded respect merely by her presence. She nodded to the court and took her seat. "We are here in the matter of guardianship for minors Emma and Jack Collins," she began, her voice clear and authoritative. "I understand both the maternal aunt, Adelaide Bennett, and the maternal grandmother, Evelyn Peterson, are seeking custody." The preliminary matters proceeded with formal statements from both attorneys. Sophia presented our case first, highlighting our stable home, financial security, and commitment to keeping the siblings together in a loving family environment with their cousin. She mentioned my stable employment without specifying my role as a judge, as we had agreed to let that revelation come naturally. Then Richard Harlow rose for my mother's case. His opening statement painted a picture of my mother as the selfless grandmother willing to devote her retirement years to raising her grandchildren, contrasted with me, the supposedly career-obsessed niece who could not be relied upon. "Your Honor," he concluded, "we will present evidence that Miss Bennett's home environment and work history make her fundamentally unsuitable as a guardian for these vulnerable children." I felt Thomas tense beside me at these words. I squeezed his hand silently, urging him to remain calm. We had anticipated this approach. The first witnesses were character references for both sides. Thomas's parents testified to our parenting abilities and stable home. My colleague from the courthouse, Judge David Chin, carefully avoided mentioning my judicial role while attesting to my character and integrity. Then came my mother's witnesses. Aunt Claire took the stand, nervously avoiding my gaze as she confirmed that she had concerns about my parenting based on family gatherings where I seemed distracted with Lily. On cross-examination, Sophia established that Aunt Claire had only seen me with Lily 4 times in 8 years, hardly enough to form a comprehensive opinion of my parenting. My cousin Beth testified via video link from California, repeating almost verbatim phrases I recognized from my mother's documented list of my failures. When Sophia asked when she had last seen me in person, she admitted it had been 5 years ago, at a family reunion when Lily was 3 years old. By mid-morning, it was my mother's turn to testify. She settled into the witness stand with the composed confidence of someone who believed absolutely in her own righteousness. Richard Harlow led her through prepared questions about her relationship with Emma and Jack, her home, her financial stability, and her availability to care for the children. Then came the attack I had been dreading. "Mrs. Peterson, do you have concerns about your daughter's ability to provide a stable home for these children?" Harlow asked. My mother sighed, a performance of reluctance that made my teeth clench. "I don't want to speak ill of my daughter," she began, the very definition of speaking ill. "But Adelaide has always struggled with commitment and follow-through. As a mother, I have watched her jump from interest to interest, job to job, never settling. Even with Lily, She seems more concerned with her career than her child's needs. Could you elaborate on her employment history? Harlow prompted. This was it. The moment of reckoning. My mother leaned forward slightly, her voice taking on a tone of sad concern. Adelaide has never held a job for more than a year or two. Right after law school, she worked at a firm, then left to clerk for a judge, then became some kind of assistant prosecutor, then something else. She constantly changes positions, always claiming it's a step up, but never finding satisfaction. She can barely hold a job. A murmur ran through the courtroom. I sat perfectly still, feeling strangely calm now that the accusation had finally been made explicit. Thomas's hand tightened around mine. And you believe this employment instability affects her parenting? Harlow continued. Of course it does. Children need consistency, stability. Adelaide's restlessness, her constant career changes create an unpredictable environment. Emma and Jack have already experienced too much instability with my younger daughter's issues. They need a rock, not another person whose priorities lie elsewhere. I felt a tear slide down my cheek and brushed it away quickly. These were not just cruel words. They were a fundamental misunderstanding of who I was, who I had always been. My mother truly believed I was incapable, unreliable, inadequate. When Richard Harlow finished his questioning, Sophia stood for cross-examination. She approached the witness stand with measured steps. Mrs. Peterson, she began, when was the last time your daughter told you about a job change? My mother frowned slightly. She doesn't always tell me directly, but I know she has moved around frequently in the legal profession. So, you don't actually know her current employment status or position? I know she works as some kind of lawyer, my mother said dismissively. The specifics change so often, it's hard to keep track. Sophia nodded thoughtfully. Your Honor, I would like to introduce evidence regarding Miss Bennett's employment history. Chief Justice Thompson nodded. Proceed. Sophia handed a document to the court clerk, who passed copies to the judge, my mother's attorney, and my mother. This is a verified record of Adelaide Bennett's employment history since graduating from Harvard Law School 8 years ago. My mother glanced at the paper, her expression unchanged. Mrs. Peterson, would you please read the final entry on that employment record? Sophia requested. My mother squinted at the document. It says, Family Court Judge, Massachusetts 6th District. Duration, 6 years to present. She looked up, confusion crossing her features. The courtroom had gone completely silent. Every eye moved between my mother and me. Chief Justice Thompson cleared her throat. For the record, she said, her voice resonating in the quiet room, I can confirm that Adelaide Bennett has served as a judge in this very courthouse for the past 6 years. She is one of the youngest judges ever appointed in our district and has an exemplary record on the bench, particularly in cases involving children's welfare. My mother's face went white. Her hand, still holding the employment record, trembled visibly. She has been a judge for 6 years. The Chief Justice repeated the words, hanging in the air like a verdict. Richard Harlow leaned over to whisper something to my mother, who shook her head slightly, still staring at me with an expression of disbelief. Mrs. Peterson, Sophia continued gently. Given this information, would you like to revise your statement about your daughter's employment stability? My mother swallowed hard. I was not aware of this position. Because your daughter stopped informing you about her career achievements after years of having them dismissed and criticized. Is that correct? Before my mother could answer, Richard Harlow stood. Objection, Your Honor. Counsel is testifying. Sustained, Chief Justice Thompson said. Miss Winters, please rephrase. Sophia nodded. Mrs. Peterson, when was the last time you expressed pride or approval regarding one of your daughter's career accomplishments? My mother's gaze dropped to her hands. I don't recall specifically. No further questions, Your Honor, Sophia said, returning to her seat beside me. As my mother stepped down from the witness stand, her shoulders slumped in a way I had never seen before. For the first time in my memory, she looked small. The next witness was Miss Patel, the social worker, who testified that both homes were physically appropriate for the children. but that her recommendation favored placement with us due to the presence of a cousin close in age and the strong family unit we had demonstrated. Finally, it was my turn to testify. As I took the oath, I felt a strange sense of peace. The truth was out now. Whatever happened next, I would no longer be carrying the weight of that secret. Sophia led me through questions about our home, our plans for integrating Emma and Jack into our family, and my relationship with my sister Natalie. Then she addressed the elephant in the room. Adelaide, could you explain to the court why you never informed your mother about your position as a judge? I took a deep breath and looked directly at my mother for the first time that day. From the time I was a child, nothing I did was ever good enough. Every achievement was met with criticism. Every goal dismissed as unrealistic. When I was appointed to the bench 6 years ago, I made the decision not to share that information with my mother because I wanted one part of my life to be free from her judgment. I wanted to do my job without hearing all the ways she thought I was failing at it. The courtroom was silent as I continued. I am not an unstable person. I am not an inadequate mother. I have built a career I am proud of, a family I cherish, and a home where Lily thrives. Emma and Jack deserve that same environment. They deserve to grow up believing in themselves, not constantly questioning their worth. When Sophia finished her questions, Richard Harlow declined to cross-examine me. There was nothing left to challenge. Chief Justice Thompson called a recess before delivering her decision. As we filed out of the courtroom, I caught a glimpse of my mother sitting alone on a bench in the hallway, looking lost. For a moment, I almost went to her. Then Thomas touched my arm, and we walked outside to breathe in the fresh air and prepare for whatever came next. The courtroom seemed more crowded when we returned after the recess, word having spread about the dramatic revelation. I kept my eyes forward as we took our seats, avoiding the curious glances from spectators. Thomas sat beside me, his steady presence a comfort as we awaited the Chief Justice's decision. My mother entered last, her attorney guiding her to their table. She looked diminished somehow, her earlier confidence replaced by a stiff uncertainty. When our eyes briefly met, she quickly looked away, a gesture that spoke volumes about how the power dynamic between us had shifted. Chief Justice Thompson returned to the bench, her expression unreadable as she settled into her chair and arranged the papers before her. The courtroom fell silent in anticipation. After careful consideration of all testimony and evidence presented today, she began, I have reached a decision in the matter of guardianship for Emma and Jack Collins. She outlined the factors considered, the stability of both households, the relationship with the children, the support systems in place, and the recommendations of the social worker. I held my breath, feeling Thomas's hand tighten around mine. While I recognize Mrs. Peterson's genuine desire to care for her grandchildren, I find that placement with Adelaide and Thomas Bennett provides the most beneficial environment for the children at this time. The presence of a cousin close in age, the demonstrated parenting capabilities, and the strong recommendation of the social worker all support this decision. Relief flooded through me, so powerful that for a moment I could not hear anything else the judge was saying. We had won. Emma and Jack would be coming home with us. Additionally, Chief Justice Thompson continued, I am ordering a visitation schedule that includes regular contact with Mrs. Peterson, recognizing the importance of maintaining that grandparent relationship. The details of this schedule will be worked out with the assistance of family services. My mother's attorney leaned over to whisper something to her, but she shook her head slightly, her eyes fixed on the surface of the table before her. This court will retain jurisdiction to modify these arrangements as circumstances change, including potential reunification with the mother upon successful completion of her rehabilitation program. Court is adjourned. The gavel struck, and the tension that had held me rigid throughout the hearing finally released. Thomas embraced me, and I buried my face against his shoulder, overwhelmed with emotion. Congratulations, Sophia said warmly as people began to file out of the courtroom. This is the right outcome for those children. I nodded, unable to form words past the lump in my throat. As we gathered our things to leave, I noticed my mother still seated at her table, now alone as her attorney spoke with the court clerk across the room. On impulse, I approached her. Mother, I said softly. She looked up, her expression a complex mixture of emotions I couldn't fully decipher. Hurt? Certainly. Anger, perhaps. But also something that might have been shame. 6 years, she said, her voice barely audible. You have been a judge for 6 years, and I did not know. You never asked, I replied simply. You assumed I was failing. She flinched slightly at my words. I was trying to protect you from disappointment. The world is harsh, Adelaide. I wanted you to be prepared. By making sure I never felt good enough? That was not protection. That was control. Her lips pressed into a thin line. You have always been so stubborn, so convinced you knew better than me. And I proved I did, I said, not unkindly. Mother, I built a life you know nothing about because you never bothered to really see me, to listen to me. You created a version of me in your head that doesn't exist. She looked away, gathering her purse and standing abruptly. The judge said I get visitation with the children. Yes, and we will honor that. But there will be boundaries, Mother. I will not allow Emma and Jack to grow up feeling the way I did. Constantly criticized and diminished. I never. She began, then stopped. For perhaps the first time in our relationship, she seemed at a loss for words. We can talk about arrangements next week, I said. For now, Thomas and I need to prepare for bringing Emma and Jack home. I turned to go, but her voice stopped me. Adelaide. She hesitated. Congratulations on becoming a judge. That is quite an achievement. The words were stiff, awkward, as if she was speaking a foreign language, but they were the closest thing to approval she had offered me in decades. I nodded once in acknowledgement, then walked away to join Thomas and Sophia by the door. Outside the courthouse, the bright afternoon sunlight felt symbolic, illuminating a new chapter in all our lives. Thomas called the social worker to arrange for Emma and Jack to move in the following day. I stood on the steps, breathing deeply, feeling both victorious and strangely sad. Are you okay? Thomas asked, slipping his arm around my waist. Yes, I said. It's just. I never wanted it to come to this. A public confrontation, our family issues exposed in court. I know, but maybe it needed to happen. Your mother has been living in a fiction of her own creation for years. Now she has to face reality. We drove home to prepare for the children's arrival, stopping to buy a welcome banner that Lily insisted on making herself. As I helped her with the letters, carefully guiding her small hands, I made a silent vow that these children would always know they were enough, exactly as they were. That evening, as we finished dinner, the doorbell rang. Thomas went to answer it while I helped Lily with her dessert. A moment later, he returned to the kitchen with an unexpected visitor. My mother stood awkwardly in our dining room, looking out of place and uncomfortable. Lily, always friendly, waved happily. Hi, Grandma. Hello, Lily, my mother said, her voice softer than usual. Then to me, may I speak with you privately? Thomas nodded to me. I'll get Lily ready for bath time. Take your time. I led my mother to the living room, gesturing for her to sit on the couch while I took the chair opposite. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Your home is lovely, she finally said, glancing around at the comfortable, lived-in space with toys neatly corralled in colorful bins and family photos on every surface. Thank you, I replied, waiting for whatever had brought her here. She smoothed her skirt over her knees, a nervous gesture I had rarely seen from her. I have been thinking about what happened today, about what you said. I remained silent, allowing her the space to continue. Perhaps I have been too critical over the years. I thought I was preparing you for a world that would judge you harshly. I didn't want you to be disappointed when things didn't work out as you hoped. But things did work out, Mother. I became exactly what I said I wanted to be, and you missed it because you were so certain I would fail. She flinched slightly. Yes, I see that now. She paused, struggling visibly with what to say next. Adelaide, I don't know how to be different than I am, but I would like to try. For Emma and Jack's sake, and for Lily's. And perhaps for ours as well. It wasn't quite an apology, but from my mother, it was extraordinary, an acknowledgement, at least, that something needed to change. It will take time, I said carefully. Trust is built slowly, especially after it has been broken repeatedly. She nodded, her eyes downcast. I understand. I just want a chance. We can start with a visitation schedule for Emma and Jack, I offered. Perhaps you could come for Sunday dinners. Spend some time getting to know them in our home first, where they feel safe. I would like that, she said. And for a brief moment, I glimpsed something in her eyes I had been seeking my entire life: respect. As she rose to leave, she paused by the mantel where a photo stood, me in my judicial robes, Thomas and Lily beside me at my investiture ceremony. You look very distinguished, she said quietly. Your father would have been proud. She left before I could respond, the mention of my father bringing a fresh ache to my heart. I stood in the doorway, watching her walk to her car. This complicated woman who had shaped so much of who I was, for better and worse. Thomas found me there a few minutes later, still looking out at the now empty street. What did she want? He asked gently. A second chance, I think. He wrapped his arms around me from behind, resting his chin on my shoulder. Are you going to give it to her? I considered the question carefully. Not unconditionally. But yes, a chance. For the children's sake, and maybe for hers too. She's not young anymore, Thomas. I don't want to look back someday and regret not trying. He nodded against my shoulder. You have always been the strongest person I know, Adelaide Bennett. And the most compassionate. That night, as I checked on Lily one last time before bed, watching her peaceful sleep in the glow of her nightlight, I thought about the legacy we pass to our children. Not just our features or our mannerisms, but our wounds, our fears, our beliefs about ourselves and the world. I had spent 30 years believing I was never quite good enough because that was what my mother had taught me. I would not pass that belief to Lily or to Emma and Jack. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, integrating 2 traumatized children into our home, establishing boundaries with my mother, balancing my return to the bench with my expanded family responsibilities. But tonight, in the quiet of my daughter's room, I felt ready for whatever came next. For the first time in my life, I knew with absolute certainty that I was enough. 3 months after the courtroom revelation, I stood in my chambers, adjusting my judicial robe before heading into court. The familiar weight of the black fabric settled on my shoulders, a physical reminder of the authority I had earned and the responsibility I carried. On my desk sat 3 framed photos, one of Thomas and me on our wedding day, one of Lily at her 5th birthday party, and a new addition, Emma and Jack laughing as they played in our backyard sprinkler with Lily. My return to the bench after the custody hearing had been met with quiet respect from my colleagues. No one mentioned the case directly, but I had received several notes of support and the occasional knowing nod in the courthouse hallways. Chief Justice Thompson had stopped by my chambers on my first day back. Family comes first, Adelaide, she had said simply. But we are glad to have you back. The children who come before this court need judges who understand what is truly at stake. I had thanked her, not just for her words, but for her role in revealing the truth. She had waved away my gratitude. The truth has a way of emerging when it is most needed. At home, we had settled into a new rhythm with 5 of us instead of 3. Emma and Jack had arrived with small suitcases and guarded expressions, uncertain of this new arrangement. Lily had immediately appointed herself their personal tour guide, showing them the backyard tree swing, the secret cupboard under the stairs where we kept board games, and the kitchen drawer dedicated to art supplies. You can have anything in here, she had told them solemnly. Except the glitter. That is only for special projects because Daddy says it multiplies when you are not looking. The first few weeks had been challenging. Jack had nightmares that sent him screaming into wakefulness, his small body shaking with terror until one of us could reach him. Emma, protective and watchful, had initially insisted on supervising every interaction between her brother and us, as if she didn't quite trust that we would take proper care of him. Thomas and I had established a stable routine, understanding that consistency would help them feel secure. Bedtimes, meals, playtimes, all followed a predictable pattern. Slowly, the children began to relax. Jack's nightmares became less frequent. Emma started to play more and supervise less. They began to feel like part of our family, rather than visitors in our home. Natalie called weekly from rehab, her voice stronger each time. She spoke to her children with a combination of love and regret that broke my heart. I'm getting better, she told them. Aunt Adelaide and Uncle Thomas will take good care of you until I can. I had visited her twice, seeing for myself the progress she was making. This time felt different from her previous attempts. This whole experience, it changed me, and it changed my family. Have you ever had to stand up to someone who constantly doubted you, especially family? What would you have done in my shoes? Tell me what you think in the comments below. I really want to know.